to select a speech topic and determine its general and specific purposes, organize the speech in a manner that best achieves those purposes, ensure the beginning, body, and conclusion reinforce the purposes, project sincerity and conviction and control any nervousness you may feel, strive not to use notes. Times 5 to 7 minutes.
There are many firsts achieved in history, and often the person responsible is remembered well. But not everyone becomes so well known despite what they achieve. In Michael's speech today, he will talk about a man whose name may not be known to the audience, but he played an important role in one of the most famous firsts in history. The Right Stuff, Michael Kord's, The Right Stuff.
Fellow Toastmasters, what did you do last Tuesday? A week ago yesterday. Think about it. The day kind of came and went, not a lot of fanfare, just like any other day. But if you read the newspaper or if you saw the news item, you might have noticed that this was an anniversary of a very major achievement in human history. Anybody know what it was? On April 12th, that was the 50th anniversary of the first human to fly into outer space. Now, we think about astronauts. A lot of us know many of their names. Let's see, there's John Glenn, there's Neil Armstrong, there's Tom Hanks. No. You just pretend. But the name you might not have heard of was a man by the name of Yuri Gagarin. He was a Russian cosmonaut. Well, in about 5 minutes, not only will you know his name, but you'll know a little more about his story. Yuri Gagarin was born in 1934 to a small farming family in Russia. His family were considered peasants. They were very poor. And then with the outbreak of World War II, they lived in the area of Russia that was occupied by Nazi Germany. In fact, their home was taken over by a German officer. Yuri's younger sisters were sent to a slave labor camp. Yuri and his parents continued to live in a small mud hut through the duration of the war. Now, despite these humble start to his life, or perhaps because of it, Yuri developed a good sense of education and hard work. His mother, who was a voracious reader, encouraged her children to embrace education and learn all you can. That was the way to a better life. Yuri was very intelligent. He excelled. After the war, he went into a vocational technical school. There, he learned and studied science and math. He was very good at these topics. He also gained an interest in astronomy and airplanes. So once he graduated at the age of 22, he decided, what do I do? Well, he did what most men in his time and situation did. He joined the military. Well, there he managed to accomplish one of his dreams. This was to become a pilot. All he wanted to do was fly. Yuri got his wings flying MiG-15s. He was very successful and quickly rose up the ranks, becoming a senior lieutenant in the military. And then, in 1957, Russia launched Sputnik. This was the first artificial satellite, and this launch of the Sputnik started the space age. With that, in 1960, Yuri applied to become part of the Soviet space training. Here they were training the first cosmonauts. Yuri was selected as one of the 20 finalists. Now, these guys were the best of the best, just like their American counterparts. But even among the 20 finalists, Yuri stood out as special. The other people that he worked with noticed that he was very intelligent, extremely hardworking, but also very humble about his own accomplishments. In fact, when these 20 finalists were asked anonymously which one of them should have the honor of taking the first flight, all but 3 said it should be Yuri. Well, he did make the finalists. They narrowed it down to the final 6 and ultimately the final 2. And it wasn't until just a couple days prior to the very first flight that Yuri was informed he was selected to have that honor. And then on the morning of April 12th, 1961, 27-year-old Yuri shoved his Lilliputian 5'2" frame into a very small metal sphere. This was the capsule. If you can look online, there's a picture of it. It is a tiny sphere. This sat on top of the Vostok 1 rocket. And here, this little farm boy was shot into space and became the first human to fly into outer space. Yuri did one complete orbit of the Earth. His flight lasted 1 hour and 48 minutes. Now, many of us have seen American astronauts upon re-entry splash down in the ocean, aircraft carrier pulls up alongside, the helicopter snatches them out to safety. The Russians did it a little bit differently at this time. Things were a little more secretive, not a lot of fanfare at the time when he was first launched. Yuri's scheduled re-entry was over a rural farmland in Russia. And it wasn't noticed or known until several years later that after re-entry, several thousand feet above the ground, he ejected from the capsule and parachuted the last few thousand feet. Now, in a scene straight out of Back to the Future, the farmer and his daughter were out there and were terrified to see this man floating to Earth in his orange spacesuit and white space helmet. And he actually said to them once he landed, please, don't be afraid. I'm a Russian just like you. I've descended from space and all I need is a telephone so I can call Moscow. Call Moscow he did, and once he returned, he immediately became a national hero. In fact, he toured the world as an ambassador for the space science and technologies. He did this, became very famous for a while. He continued to work with the Soviet space crew, working on future craft, and even entertained hopes of someday flying again into outer space. But unfortunately, he was a victim of his own fame. The Soviet officials decided it's probably a little bit too risky to put Yuri back into a spacecraft. He was their hero. He was the face of everything they have been accomplishing. Well, Yuri was the backup pilot, sort of an understudy for the Soyuz 1 project, and this flight is noted for being the first fatality in space flight. The cosmonaut was killed on re-entry when his parachute didn't open. Well, that was enough for the officials. They said, absolutely not. Yuri cannot participate in any more future space flights. And with that, barely 30 years of age, his career as a cosmonaut was over. So what did Yuri do? Well, he loved flying. He reapplied to requalify as a fighter pilot, which he did. And then a few years later, in 1967, while flying a routine mission, Yuri's plane went down in bad weather and he was killed. He was only 34 years old. Well, this time next year, on April 12th, take a few minutes and think back to this small Russian man who truly had the right stuff. Mr. Coachman.